write you a check, and that's who's going to pay the bills. So I think this book aligns with where we're at in society today because there's no narratives left, and we're making all these decisions off emotions, and nothing is foundational. And that's why I really believe that Finding a Perfect Audience will change the world. And there's nothing out there like it today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Leaders Talk. It is, as always, your favorite time of the week and my favorite time of the week. And as always, I am here with you, Andrew Dupuy, head of communication here at Leaders Brands. And today, my guest is John Edmonds Kozma. So, who is John Edmonds Kozma? Well, he is a highly experienced professional with 20 years of expertise in the entertainment industry. He is the CEO and the founder of Bang Production, a company that specializes in creating short and long form content, managing talent, producing live shows, all through technology. He is also, importantly to us, the author of Finding Your Perfect Audience, Cracking the Social Media Code, and he is the host of the Unimpressed podcast. John, welcome. It is absolutely a pleasure to have you here. So that was a very, very brief introduction. I know there's a whole lot about you that our audience doesn't know. So you have the floor. Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, Finding a Perfect Audience is going to change the world. And that's what we need to focus on. And yeah, I've been in comedy for about, I don't know, almost 10 years now. And we had an opportunity to change comedy with a comedian called Southern Mama, Darren Knight, in
Yes.
2016. We took Darren from the trailer park to Just for Laughs, which is the Super Bowl comedy. And this is kind of where this journey started of me proofing out this model for
Yeah.
finding a perfect audience.
Yeah, and that's a really hard industry to get into, and I think that's going to be of interest to a lot of our listeners because they immediately think, "Wow, you're talking about comedy, stand-up comedy, long-form comedy. That's really, really difficult for somebody to actually get into it and stand out and do exactly what you're saying is finding that perfect audience." So, tell us a little bit about that story, about what inspired you to write specifically in the book about what you're writing about, and just a little bit about what that perfect audience looks like.
Well, I had success in comedy because I didn't know the rules of comedy. And
Okay.
and and when I got in, and saw this kid, I was in TV development, and I actually signed a deal with this guy Chris Case. Me and him were going to partner. He was a pretty big showrunner in LA, and actually he produces Bill Maher's podcast today.
Oh wow.
And and when I saw this kid, I told Chris, I said, let's try to find this guy a manager. Let's try to find this guy a manager because all we were looking for at the time were characters to, make TV shows with. And at the time, I'd sold 3 shows. I sold one to USA Network and sold 2 to the History Channel.
Okay.
And, I developed about 1,000 shows, and I wasn't very happy with television at that time. And because you spend your life developing a project for a year, and then you take it and you pitch it, and then 20 people in a room tell you how bad it is after you've spent a year of your life to do this. So, I went out to a couple people I knew that were managers in comedy, and they're like, he doesn't need a manager. He needs 3 to 5 years development. And you know what? I said, screw it. I flew to Alabama. We signed him. And because I didn't know the rules of comedy, I started realizing that, I think the guy Dave Attell said to me or
Mhm.
whatever that comedy didn't need social media. And when I started thinking about that, this process just started to resonate with me. And when I realized that a lot of industries didn't realize who was paying the bills, and they started appeasing industry, and the process of building your narrative. So I said, if we reverse engineer this just mentally, I said, I just put it together a rationale because when in comedy, I looked at it like a dinosaur model.
Okay.
And what, if you want to be a comedian, people would say, hey, you know go go gig 5 7 days a week in a club, right?
Mhm.
Start getting reps in. But the bad thing about that is if 50 people come to that show, they have no idea, if you're new to comedy, you're new to doing stand up, they have no idea who's going to be there doing comedy. So let's say you pull two people out of that room, right? When you pull two people out of that room, what do you think the growth is for a comedian to, build an audience, right? It
Right.
takes a long time. And that gave me a window with social media where I said, if I can take something that's authentic, right, and
Mhm.
let them be authentic, knowing the rules of television, right? When I say authentic, I reverse engineer the process of producing as well. So I said, if I take authenticity and this represents this person and represents his tone, right? And we put that out to the world, right, through social media, you're going to attract a certain tone back,
Yeah.
right? So I said, if we can stay in one spot and put that out to the world, we can build an audience faster in comedy than trying to gig 5 to 7 days a week. And then that's when we pioneered comedy because nobody was doing it. And I took Darren to Just for Laughs in less than 2 years from the trailer park. It was 2016. We signed him. He was at Just
Mhm.
for Laughs in 2018. I think we sold out 150 shows in a row, changed the whole dynamic of comedy. And now today, everybody copies my model with social media, right? It's playing out in front of us today, but we were the pioneers of that. And just more and more things have started resonating with me of, all right, how can we apply this process to the business world? How can we
Mhm.
apply this process to your life? Because we're all connected.
Yeah.
And hopefully that aligns with the question you ask and hopefully explains that enough.
Yeah, it does, and that's also, and you went exactly in the direction I was kind of hoping you were going to, because what's interesting about this is the idea that you can take the concept of finding an audience for a comedian or finding an audience for someone that is a content creator, but you can also apply that across the business, because that's I think going to be something that's relevant and of interest to a lot of our listeners is, because many are going to say, well, I mean, I'm not really a comedian. I'm not really looking for some kind of entertainment audience, but I am looking for an audience for, my particular business. So what are some of the areas where those two things cross over that would, kind of explain a little bit to our audience exactly how they can apply some of your concepts to the business world?
Well, when you think about law of attraction, and when I
Yeah.
thought about putting Darren on stage and thought about, you know, how do I want him to present himself? How do I want him to convey his message? Because if you're in television, they'll take a talent and they will rewrite or reproduce or overproduce, whatever it is, and they take the voice away from a authentic talent to some extent. So when you
Right.
realize that you can overproduce a talent instead of letting a talent be an authentic source of whatever that narrative is, right? That's kind of how I produced him. So I was like, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help him with, his timing. I'm going to give him an outline, right? But I want him to take his authentic self and fill this outline and we're going to craft the timing around this set. So I never wanted to dilute his authentic message,
Okay.
right? So when you apply that to the business world today, right? It's not about 20, it's the same thing. It's not about 20 people in a room who think they know how to start a business. So if I'll give you a good example of this is a chef,
Okay.
right? A chef trying to start a restaurant group or whatever. A chef is somewhat an artist, right? And you can take a chef, and as long as that chef is putting out his message that's authentic to him, right? That message is going to resonate with a certain type of person because when it's authentic, tone attracts tone. It's just like friends that you have in your life. You hang
Yeah.
around people who have a very similar tone to you, right? So as long as you can stay true to the authenticity and convey the source message that represents you or your product 110%, people are going to respond naturally if the content is entertaining,
Mhm.
relatable, or educational. Those are the three buckets you put out to the world. And when you put that message out to the world on social media, on whatever app it is, right? Understanding the tendencies of the app, we're putting this out to the world. There's a tone that's going to respond to that. And that tone that responds to that message is a demographic, right? So we start looking at those demographics that are responding. And instead of listening to these, scientists or whoever you want to call them in this room who think they know everything, we need to know who's paying the bills. And when I did that in comedy, when you thought about that model and comedians come in the industry, they would come in and try to appease the industry, right? And the industry somewhat forgot who was paying
Yeah.
the bills, right? They forgot all about who's paying the bills. So the people who are paying the bills is your demographic that's responding to the tone of your message and your source. So when that you get that demographic and you get that information, you take that top demographic, whether it's a 35 to 44-year-old, female, whatever it is, and you start doubling down and focusing on that very pure source demo that's attracted to the tone of your message, right? So, because everything else, right, everything else outside of that is exponential. So you
Mhm.
start eliminating the bad customer, right, which is going to save you time, and you're creating a customer base that's going to already like you, that comes into your home, your social media home, that already likes you. So it makes it easier to sell them shit, you know,
Yeah.
because they already like you. Same thing in the comparison to the comedy show is I sold out 150 shows in a row. When the comedian showed up, even though he didn't have a lot of history on stage, the fans already loved him because they were already there. In their tone aligned with his message. So, you can apply this same thing to the business world. You can apply this to your life, right? I think our egos and a lot of things get in the way of this natural process that have created so much fluff and delusion in the world, which we see now. It's all about finding thyself, you know, and we
Yeah.
forgot about the foundation, building our
Yeah.
foundation, building a business based on the demographic that's responding to my message, because that's going to who writes you a check, and that's who's going to pay the
Right.
bills. So I think this book aligns with where we're at in society today, because there's no narratives left, and we're making all these decisions off emotions, and nothing is foundational. And that's why I really believe that finding a perfect audience will change the world, and there's nothing out there like it today.
I am very in much of agreement. It's very interesting that you're saying this because I mean I've been another book I'm working on. We've talked about this as well. It's like the idea that right now businesses have become too tied up in the concept of the focus group. It's like you say, the 20 guys in a room. And one of the examples I had brought up to me by another business leader was, the Budweiser thing
Yeah.
where they had a marketing plan to try and find a different audience than the one that they had cultivated for many many years and built a brand around and did everything. You can say what you want about the quality of that message, whether it was good or not. But it didn't fit. But
Hmm.
it was what they thought fit because somebody in a group said, "Oh, we haven't hit this number." But that lost their authenticity. So is that are those the kind of mistakes that you feel like businesses are making when you say that everybody is kind of getting stuck in this idea of not being authentic and losing that kind of originality?
110%. Because
Yeah.
just because you try to put a round peg in a square hole doesn't mean it's going to fit.
Right.
That's chasing, you know, that's chasing an emotion, which is a bad decision, because the way I structure finding a perfect audience is three
Mhm.
phases, right? The first phase is environment, foundation, and sensitivities. So if we understand our environment completely, what we accept, you know, vibrations we accept have a bearing on our life. So we can accept those vibrations in our environment, or we can't accept those vibrations in our environment. We can
Mhm.
align ourselves in our environment the right way, or we can't align ourselves in our environment the right way. So when you understand your demographics is in the foundation, we understand our environment, we build our demographics, which is our foundation. Those pure numbers and those pure demographics, right, will
Mhm.
create a sensitivity that is a pure source. And Budweiser or Bud Light should understand that because their sensitivity is never going to change. Now
Right.
there might be tags, right? There might be additions to that source and that sensitivity, but once you establish that tone, right, and that sensitivity of the business based on the demographics, that never changes, right?
Yeah.
So then you go to phase two is tone and timing. So we know our environment, we know our demographic in the foundation, we know the sensitivity that demographic creates for the business. So your tone, right, is based on that sensitivity. And we're going to continue to put that same tone out to the world and stay in that pure source because, like I said, you eliminate the bad customer, you keep doubling down on the pure source that that's the lane you need to stay in, right? And then the
Yeah.
timing, the timing of that message is very important because that demographic is a way for you to know when the timing is going to happen. So, like this 35 to 44-year-old group over here communicates at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. They
Yeah.
don't communicate at 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. So you're getting that information from your foundation of knowing when to communicate the tone at the right time.
Right.
Then the last step is emotions, right? Emotions and then landscape or full consciousness. So emotions in the Budweiser instance, they
Yeah.
put that emotion piece first. So if
Right.
you understand that I've done phase one and phase two right, right, you look at the emotional pieces of whatever is being said in society, right, based on your product. You need to look at that emotional response. You need to digest that, take a step back, right, and see where that aligns with your pure source. And then that's where you make your micro improvements. You don't have a knee jerk reaction and try to chase the market because we've already established your pure source demo,
Right.
right? And what happens in these big corporations, and then you make these micro fixes, which gets you to full consciousness, understanding the full social media landscape, right? And you just step and repeat that process, step and repeat that process, step and repeat that process, because your micro fixes will come through the emotions and it's not a knee jerk reaction decision making deal,
Gotcha.
right? And it keeps everything locked in. So the corporations today started all these big corporations, and this is why a lot of them are going to have problems, is they started with a source of a message and what their pure source was. And then they
Mhm.
got so big, they started creating these silos of businesses
Gotcha.
around this source. And then the silos got so big, they don't even know what their source is, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the focus group, they don't even know what their source is. So they're conveying a message for a source they don't even know and trying to find focus groups, which is a very small percentage of what the landscape looks like. That's a waste of money and time.
Yeah.
And people need to realize this. And corporations are going to have to reset or establish their businesses the right way based on this model, based on where AI is going. Because when you take customer data and implement it in AI, and people don't do this, you're going to get an answer faster, but it's going to be the same wrong answer because your demographic and your source of who your client is off 30 to 40% because of all the multiple delusions within the business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of it in a ball of wax. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, it's like that old concept of sometimes you can fight a war so long that you forget what you forget the reasons that you started it. And
Yeah.
if you do that, then what strategies are you going to have? If you don't know what your goal is anymore, then how are you ever going to achieve that?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. And
100%.
yeah, and it sounds obvious, but yeah, you're very much right. I think that it's a pratfall that a lot of businesses run into as they begin to get bigger. So how does, let's say, a small business that's growing that has a really firm source that they've got that North Star and they've got the thing that they feel like is our authentic brand and everything. How do they stick to that and be able to grow that and make that the thing that they concentrate on when there's always the temptation of, we can maybe experiment with things that aren't necessarily our brand.
Well, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And you have to put blinders on, right? And you can't, once you establish what your source is, what you're conveying, and what your message is, and you know that's authentic to you, and you know that's you 110%, you just have to put your blinders on and continue to improve that message within the guardrails of that narrative,
Okay.
right? Because when you get out here and get distracted with all the bullshit, these people trying to sell you this, trying to sell you that, 20 people in a room are not going to make your business successful. It's
Mhm.
about finding a source and a narrative that is successful and staying true to that and build value in that, because that's where your true value will come. Because if you build value within yourself, they will come naturally. You don't have to chase value with other
Yeah.
entities that want to take your money.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, and I
Oh,
think, yeah, well, when I think when your customer base is off 30, 40%, and you probably have 30 or 40% of waste that you're paying for in your corporation, you need to put this under your own house and eliminate, right, and utilize the technology that's in front of us. If people really realize the technology that was in front of us, they could eliminate 30, 40% of their processes that they have within their corporation.
yeah. And that's what you get from focus,
Yes,
which you don't get when you're not focused. Um,
correct.
and I think a lot of people can understand this just from the old sales concept of pre-framing, because what you're telling me about with your past experience in comedy was that you use social media to begin to build the fan base outside of the shows. So, and that was because you were able to stay authentic. And I think that works in business to think about the idea of pre-framing. And is that kind of why you wrote a book? Because I know that books can work very much into creating something that's an authentic source that you can stick with and have as almost like a central cornerstone and Bible of your business or life or however it works.
I don't know. I realized that when I understood law of attraction,
Hmm.
and then because this book it's very strange how it happened. I used to say these words. I used to say environment. I used to say foundation. I used to say sensitivities. I would say tone, timing, emotions. I would use all these in conversation. And one day I was walking on the beach. I put those words in an order, and that was the birth of Finding a Perfect Audience. I don't even know, really, it just kind of came naturally.
Okay.
But what is weird is, you know, I uh, I kind of do, naturally, like with my podcast, I talk about I dig into people's non-conscious. So everything that I do is in alignment with the book. But then I realized that the structure of it is a universal process that could be used for anything and everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because, if we teach kids who they really are, and we align them in the right direction based on their non-conscious, right? They're going to eliminate a lot of the bad decisions and a lot of the trauma that they potentially could run into in their life. It's
Yeah.
really the same process with a business, this finding a perfect audience, which is very odd. It just kind of naturally came together, you know?
Yeah.
So did I think I'd ever write a book? No. Do I
Yeah.
think this book is different? Yes. Do I think it's going to change a lot of stuff? Yes.
Oh,
and
I
people got
think,
to dig in.
yeah. I think you found something that's fairly unique. You found something that when you really think about it is universally applicable. And a lot of people don't necessarily see that until it's spelled out to them because yeah, I mean, I kind of understood the concepts of what you're talking about before we met here today, but it makes very much sense of how this can be something that's very effective in just about everything. It's really a way of thinking as much as it is some kind of specific strategy.
Well, the thing is I was able to use content to demonstrate the quantum field. So if you understand that, I mean, that's a little deep. If you understand that the
Right.
internet's based off our nervous system, right? And apps are created based off human behavior, then the app implements an algorithm that creates balance and pushes their business agenda. All we're doing on social media is mirroring human behavior. So
Yeah. Exactly.
you can encapsulate that tone within that content and put it out to a mass number, and people will respond naturally. You really don't have to sell people anything if you design your narrative the right way. And this is a big statement. This process could eliminate marketing altogether because it will pin you against the wall. It will predetermine the answers you need for your business, for your career, for your life. It can predetermine that, right? And if you want to get a little deeper, which I want to stay away from, I just want to stay on the surface so people can use it as a practical
Oh
tool.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but science only uses two parts of law of attraction to determine answers for humanity, right? And that's why science has created a realm of physics. This is not a real realm of physics.
Right.
The real realm of physics is the quantum field. And Einstein and Oppenheimer were not that smart, because I don't think God wanted us to split an atom. He wanted us to use these atoms to improve our process, right? And then look at the Newtonian model of reality. We accepted that model of reality. Why are we waiting to react to something that puts us behind the curve
Gotcha.
when we have all this information and data that can be demonstrated through social media that can help us predetermine everything we need to be successful?
Yeah. And it makes sense. It really does, and especially when it's just spelled out that way. Well, Johnny, you're right. We could deep dive into this, and we could probably go on for 2 or 3 hours on this. But you did write a book so that we don't have to.
Yes, yes, yes.
So why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about how they can find more about you, how they can get access to your book?
All right, it's here it is right here. Finding a Perfect Audience, right? It's on Amazon, it's on all the distribution outlets out there. You can check out John Edmonds Kozma.com. That's JohnEdmonds Kozma.com. And all my information will be right there on my website. And like I said, you can get the book pretty much anywhere right now.
Perfect. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, those links are down below as well. So go ahead and give a click through over there and look into what more of what John has to say. John, I really appreciate it. We've run out of time today, but like I say, I think we could go on and on and on. But yeah, we everybody should follow that on. We wish you the best of luck in your endeavor, sir.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.